If there is one movie monster that has truly stood the test of time, it would have to be the zombie. Our modern version of the zombie came to us from a small independent movie from the late 60s, and has since exploded into the mainstream. No other monster has ever come close to reaching the zombie's level of success and popularity. Werewolves had their day in the 40s and early 80s. Aliens have come and gone. Ghosts were cool in the mid-2010s. And sure, vampires were the it monster in the late 2000s, but that fad fizzled almost as quickly as it began. Zombies, on the other hand, have had the power to stand strong against all of them. These days, there is zombie everything. Zombie movies, zombie TV shows, zombie comics, zombie video games, zombie books. Rob Zombie? I could go on forever. There is just something about zombies that have been able to capture our fascination and feed our morbid curiosity about what we would do if the dead were to rise and society crumbled. Where would you go? What would you do? Would you be able to kill your friends and loved ones if they were to turn? Would you be able to survive? Or would you end up as one of the mindless flesh eaters? The possibilities are endless, and that's why we love the idea of the zombie so much. But as the years have changed, so have zombies. Originally, they were mindless shuffling ghouls, risen from the grave by spaceborne radiation. Now, they can be almost anything. They can run, climb, talk, and dance. Different projects have put their own unique spin on the zombie mythology and lore, and that has made me wonder, what exactly is the deadliest version of the zombie? Well, after hours upon hours of research, I think I have come up with a conclusive answer to that question. But before we get into what is the deadliest zombie strain, we should probably define what a zombie is. Like I said, there are countless different types of zombies now, and many of them play it pretty loose with the rules. So, for the sake of this video, a zombie has to fit the following criteria. They have to be a human that has died, reanimated, and consumes the flesh of the living. So things like the infected from 28 Days Later, the reanimated from Reanimator, and the fungus people from The Last of Us don't count. But before we get into today's video, I wanted to let you guys know that my paranormal podcast, The Lost Campfire, is up and running. You can check it out on Spotify and Apple Podcasts if you love hearing about real people who have had real encounters with ghosts, cryptids, UFOs, aliens, and much, much more. And if you have ever had your very own experience with the paranormal, you can send in your story to thelostcampfire@gmail.com today to possibly be featured in a future episode. Now, let's get back to the zombies. Let's start out with the original classic zombies from the Romero Dead series: Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, and Land of the Dead. As I stated before, these zombies are rather simplistic. Radiation from outer space caused the recently deceased to rise from the grave, and they have an insatiable hunger for human flesh. A single bite from these ghouls is more than enough to cause a life-ending infection that would cause you to reanimate like all the others. Now, that might sound scary and worrisome, but I never quite understood what made these zombies so dangerous. They are incredibly slow, stupid, and easy to outmaneuver. If anything, Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead were more commentaries on human nature and our inability to work together than it was about zombies. If everyone in those movies just put their differences aside and worked towards a common goal, they all would have been fine. But no, they had to argue and fight, which ends up with almost everyone dead. But if these zombies pose such a small threat, what are they doing on this list? Well, it's because as the years went on, these zombies began to evolve. It all started in Day of the Dead, when Dr. Frankenstein started experimenting with the zombie Bub. Frankenstein was able to teach Bub simple tasks like shaving or answering a phone, and it turns out that Bub seemed to have memories of his former life before he reanimated. And as the movie progresses, we learn that not only has Bub been trained and domesticated, he seems to have remnants of human emotions as well. He's a really sympathetic character, and we feel for him, but it cannot be ignored that this is a sign that the dead are learning and evolving. Given more time, who knows what could happen? We finally got that answer 20 years later with Land of the Dead. In this movie, it has been decades since the original zombie outbreak, and the dead have essentially taken over the planet. Humans live in small communities wherever they can scavenge for survival. It truly is the Land of the Dead. What makes these zombies special is that they have since been able to recall much of their former lives, like Bub. They remember their jobs, their loved ones, their hobbies, and they appear to develop friendships with their fellow dead. It's like they are slowly becoming human again. But memories are not the only thing these zombies have been able to develop. They can now communicate with grunts and gestures, and they can use basic tools. But there is one thing that they have been able to figure out that makes them even more deadly: the ability to organize. In Land of the Dead, the zombie Big Daddy creates an entire army of ghouls to lay siege on Fiddler's Green, and pretty effectively too. The human settlement gets torn to shreds at the hands of the zombies. After destroying the settlement, what would stop the zombies from traveling all across North America to create an unstoppable undead army? Unfortunately, George Romero died a few years ago, so we will never get a proper sequel to Land of the Dead. So I guess we will just have to imagine what would happen to the last remnants of the human race as the zombies evolve and grow over time. Now, I love these movies, but I do have to say, I don't think these zombies are that dangerous. If this were to happen in real life, there is no doubt that countless people would die, but I do not believe that society would crumble. I think plenty of countries would be able to recognize the threat and effectively take care of it in a relatively short time frame. Some cities might have to get nuked, but overall, I think we would be fine in the end. Even in the Romero movies, it took several decades for the dead to be able to evolve enough to reach the level of basic communication, tool use, and organization. I just don't think the undead would be allowed to exist as long as they need to reach that level of intelligence. Up next, we have the running zombies from movies like Train to Busan, World War Z, and the 2004 remake of Dawn of the Dead. Making these monsters run was a natural progression to make the zombie scarier. For years, they could barely walk. Now they can run, jump, climb, and swarm like never before. Zombies have finally been upgraded, and they have become deadlier than ever. I know there are many zombie lovers out there who absolutely hate the idea of the undead running, and I can understand why. It really goes against all logic. How can a dead creature with rotting flesh and rigor mortis possibly run? But even those who hate the idea must admit that the concept of a running zombie is downright terrifying. Look, most people these days can barely run for 5 minutes straight. Now imagine being chased by an undead cannibal that sprints right at you and never gets tired. The first time I saw that in the Dawn of the Dead remake, I almost shit my pants. There is no doubt that if these zombies were to actually exist, we would all be in some serious trouble. Most people would not survive. Police forces, militaries, and militias would not be able to hold them off. The only thing that would stop them is a massive amount of nuclear strikes, and even that's not guaranteed. All it would take is one to survive to start a whole new infection. But as deadly as I think these zombies are, they do have some serious flaws that might prevent them from conquering the planet. For example, in Train to Busan, the zombies are effectively blind. They can't see shit in darkness or low lighting. Even during the day, they aren't exactly eagle-eyed. They rely mainly on sound. So if people were to adapt to that, these zombies can be easily avoided. And in World War Z, the zombies will only attack and infect people who are viable hosts for the virus to spread. So if you were old, crippled, or riddled with disease, the zombies won't even acknowledge you. This leaves plenty of people left alive that can gather, fight, and find a cure, which is essentially what happens in the movie. So we have zombies that have the capacity to learn and think, and zombies that can run like the wind. What could be worse? How about zombies that can do both, but better? Introducing one of the best zombie movies ever made, Return of the Living Dead. This movie took zombies to the next level. It starts out with a worker from a medical supply warehouse telling a new employee that the movie, Night of the Living Dead, was loosely based on a true story. Apparently, the government was able to develop a chemical called trioxin that has the ability to bring the dead back to life. In typical government fashion, they lost a batch of this chemical, but it ended up in this very medical supply warehouse. Of course, the dumbasses working there release the trioxin, and all hell breaks loose. At first, this seems like your standard zombie movie. The dead rise, consume the living, yada yada yada. All you gotta do is destroy their brains and you'll be fine. But wait, these zombies don't go down that easy. These zombies don't go down at all. You can destroy their brains or chop them into bits, it doesn't make a difference. They just keep coming. Hell, even if you were to burn them to ash, the trioxin in their bodies will vaporize, form a cloud, and rain the dead-raising chemical down to Earth. You can't win! As the movie progresses, we find out that not only are the zombies nearly indestructible, but they can think, talk, run, organize, and even set up elaborate traps so they can devour those sweet, sweet brains. These zombies do not fuck around. The only thing that was able to stop them was a nuclear device, and even still, the movie ends on a cliffhanger, heavily implying that once the zombies were destroyed, the trioxin vaporized, and the infectious reign had already started, thus sparking a true zombie apocalypse. Now, some of you may be thinking that there is no other zombie strain that can be worse than the trioxin zombies from Return of the Living Dead. But I think there is one more that takes the cake. Those are the zombies from the Left 4 Dead video game franchise. The disease in question is known as the green flu, and its origins are a complete mystery. Some believe that the green flu was a biochemical experiment gone wrong, and others believe it was from outer space. Regardless, this disease is incurable and highly infectious. Graffiti that can be found within the game explains that once infected, it can only take up to 5 minutes before turning. Hell, within 2 weeks of the first reported case, almost the entire human race has become infected and turned into an undead zombie. In fact, throughout the story campaigns for both games, players only come into contact with very few uninfected humans, and that usually doesn't last long before they turn or are killed. Much like the previous zombies, these infected can run, climb, jump, attack, and swarm like no tomorrow. But they don't seem to have the ability to think like the Romero or trioxin zombies. So what makes these guys worse than all the rest? Well, the longer you stay infected, the more you mutate. Over the course of both games, players encounter plenty of infected who have mutated into horrific monstrosities. Some of them become boomers, which are these bloated fat asses that spew infectious waste that blinds the player and attracts more infected. There's the hunter, an infected that stalks its prey like a tiger, before leaping great distances through the air to shred its victim apart with its razor-sharp claws. Then there's the smoker, a disgusting being that shoots out an elongated tongue that wraps around a human before pulling them in to devour. There's also the spitter, an infected with a belly full of rotten acid that can be launched at uninfected to melt them down to a puddle of goo and blood. Then there's the charger. This zombie will charge at the player, grab them, and repeatedly slam them into the ground until every bone in their body is broken. My least favorite would have to be the jockey. This pain in the ass will leap upon the uninfected and drag them away to be feasted upon by more infected. Finally, we have the two worst of the mutated, the witch and the tank. The witch is an infected that sits weeping on the ground until it gets disturbed. Then it flies into a frenzy of screaming and slashing until the unlucky SOB who found her has been torn to shreds. Then we have the most dangerous of them all, the tank. These mutated look like they have been injected with every steroid known to man. They run on their knuckles like a fucking shaved gorilla, they throw cars, and they have a punch that would make Mike Tyson blush. Don't screw around with the tanks. What's worse is, the mutated work together to separate, kill, and devour the uninfected. The jockeys and the spitters are a dangerous combo, but the boomer and the smoker work symbiotically too. God help you if the witch and the hunter team up and set their sights on your sorry ass. The tank doesn't need assistance, but dead is dead, doesn't matter how we get there. So, in conclusion, these extreme mutations and the ability to work perfectly together, mixed with a near unstoppable infection rate and turn time, makes me think that those infected with the green flu are truly the deadliest zombies. But now I want to get your guys' opinion. What do you think is the deadliest version of the zombie? Obviously, I had to look over plenty of zombie media for the sake of this video, so there are possibly some hidden gems that might be even deadlier than the ones I mentioned. If so, please tell me about it down in the comments section. But until then, thanks for watching, and I will see you guys next time.